Hey, Mickey.
Bob.
Mickey.
Bob, I did not ask for the anal probe. But you did.
I didn't ask for an anal probe. You're getting me mixed up with somebody else. You're getting me mixed up with one of your Beverly Hills thrill-seeking friends. I've never requested or even intimated that I would like an anal probe. What is that? What is that?
This is the anal probe. It's not a Toobin reference, Bob. It's a reference to your recent newsletter about aliens coming and administering us anal probes only when absolutely necessary.
I said they'd be nice. I predicted that they would be nice.
Nice anal probes. Okay.
We can get into that later. But
I wanted to get into it right now.
What I said was they won't. I predict that they will be nice and they will not eat us and they will not administer any anal probes that aren't absolutely necessary. That's right. That's a working definition of a nice alien.
Right. And readers have reacted against this benign view of aliens.
Have they?
A tweeter named Selfish Wizard. Well, there are a couple of comments on your newsletter. Also, a tweeter named Selfish Wizard said, Bob believes the universe has a purpose leading to an omega point of enlightenment, where that purpose is revealed. It seems the statistical likelihood of a universe filled with life is quite high, but the likelihood that advanced life forms will share Bob's purpose may not be. And that's my general critique of this, which is, what if it's a failure of the imagination? Why couldn't we have a rational alien civilization perfectly capable of mastering interstellar warp drive that was not benign, that believed in an us versus them mentality? They were perfectly rational with themselves, but they killed and ate aliens. Or they did what Michael Valentine Smith does in that Robert Heinlein novel, which is you understand, a new life, new planet. You thoroughly grok it. That's where the word grok comes from. And then you destroy it. It's like the Buddhists making Mandelas. Life is ephemeral, but you understand that you destroy it. So we would be understood.
So should we go down? I have a reply, but should we go down this rabbit hole or say that we'll resume it in the Parrot room or say that we'll resume it at the end of this?
I'm in favor of going down all rabbit holes.
It just seems to me you're trying to divert everyone from what the obvious lead topic is.
Which is what?
How deeply saddened Mickey is that his nemesis, Jeffrey Toobin, has been rehabilitated. I wanted to extend my sympathies.
There's a Parrot room topic. We have three great Parrot room topics. We have Hunter Biden, Jeffrey Toobin, and Jeffrey Epstein. The trifecta of
there is something I want to say about Epstein.
Okay, well, let's put that off.
But what happened to Hunter Biden? Not that I want to leave either Toobin or the UFOs on the shelf here.
He was caught using in his laptop using a form of the N-word. We'll get to that.
Oh, right. I saw it. But he was, anyway, not Bob, that I'm here to defend Hunter Biden.
Why are you're trying to push your Parrot room topics on my serious, sober non-Parrot room topic, which is alien life forms.
Oh, Jeffrey Toobin's not serious now? He was really serious. Did you see him? He looked super serious.
He was sort of affable. He's clearly not topic A. I mean, Jesus, we have reconciliation. We have,
How about reconciliation?
Democracy is dying, and you want to talk about Jeffrey Toobin? Jesus.
Well, Jeffrey Toobin is a symptom.
We have the COVID epidemic still raging. We have infrastructure bills moving slowly through Congress. I mean,
so far, Toobin and UFOs are tied for most interesting, I would say. Keep going. Maybe something will happen.
Well, let's do the UFOs now before you have time to think of a response.
Oh, man. Do you think people care? Really? Okay, fine. Let's do it.
We can do it quickly.
Well, this report is coming out any week now from the government that's going to say, well, you should take it kind of seriously, maybe. I was listening to this podcast about this, the Washington Post podcast, and for the first time I heard what Obama had actually said. And it was kind of ill-advisedly phrased. What he said was, so far as aliens go, I can't tell you all I know. I mean, that's exactly what he said. He didn't even say, so far as UFOs go. Right. And then he went on to be more explicitly tantalizing, and you couldn't even tell if he had been kidding in the first part. Anyway, UFOs. Okay. So this report's going to come out. It's going to be topic A. People might as well be prepared to discuss it in the most profound context, which, of course, is my newsletter. So I put out this newsletter arguing that Well, two things. We should hope, A, that there are extraterrestrials who show up pretty soon, or else at least communicate from afar. Because one thing science has shown us in recent decades is that there are a lot of planets in the so-called Goldilocks zone, which is, say, not too hot for life, not too cold for life. If there were water on the planet, it wouldn't spend the whole year as ice and it wouldn't just be vaporized. And like in our galaxy alone, the Milky Way galaxy, there are at a minimum like 20 billion with a B of these planets. Okay. And so if you assume that our planet wasn't just uniquely blessed with the origin of life, and then if you assume a couple of other things like evolution, natural selection would tend to create more complex and intelligent life as it's done on our planet, that eventually you'd have at least a half decent chance of getting a life form intelligent enough to launch technological evolution, which would itself have a similar trajectory, then presumably you'd get at least a fair number of planets. I mean, remember, we're starting with 20 billion, okay? You get at least a fair number of planets that would be a few millennia ahead of us technologically, especially given that many of these planets are way, way, way older than ours, okay? And so then if they're a few millennia ahead of us, they probably got a way of communicating with us. And that's what you would expect. I mean, you actually need a few millennia plus a few millennia because it might take them a while to get here. But still, the most plausible answer as to why there wouldn't be extraterrestrials is that if you buy those assumptions that life itself is not all that unlikely and so on, is that they get to the point we're at and then they blow themselves up. They or else they keep descending into chaos. They just can't get past this barrier. I mean, it's a good time to plug the whole purpose of my newsletter, the Apocalypse Aversion Project, which is devoted to getting us to cross the threshold into a global community rather than remain mired in tribalism and continuing to repeatedly descend into, succumb to the baser part of our nature, not even baser, but anyway, and certainly not blow the thing up. So first of all, that was the first thing I said. It's bad news if there aren't aliens out there chomping at the bit to chat with us. I want them to show up. Then the second point was the one you brought up. They'll probably be nice because I maintain that to get past the point we're at, to cross that threshold, you have to do more than say, well, it is my argument that you actually have to progress morally in a somewhat profound sense. You have to become aware of your cognitive biases, aware of how groupish your psychology is, and actually see the world more clearly in a more enlightened way.
But that assumes that their problems are the same as our problems. Why would their problem be tribalism? Maybe they've surmounted tribalism. They have no tribes. They're all one species. And they all love each other, but they have some other problem, which is they have like a suicidal impulse or something. They have to. I mean, you don't know. This seems to be reification. You're assuming that everything else is just like us. Maybe they come out of
reification means. You sure that's what reification means? I may win on these grounds alone. I think I just won the debate.
As I use it, reification, and I admit I have trouble finding this exact definition on the web, but it's what I was taught. Reification is the false assumption that the way things are is the way they always will be.
I thought reification was like concretizing the abstract or something. But anyway,
there's that too.
I should get back in self-promotion mode and say it's the Nonzero newsletter on Substack. That's how you find what I'm calling the Apocalypse Aversion Project. Okay, so the question you asked is a good one, and it's true that this part of the argument I have never sat down and fleshed out. It's not like I would imagine, getting some magazine to publish it or getting people to buy it in book form. But I think you could argue that that what we're calling the psychology of tribalism is actually the expression of fairly generic characteristics which would have to be found on any planet that would get life to us to our level in the first place. And by that, I mean, there has to be a certain kind of interplay between zero-sum and non-zero-sum dynamics. That is what has led to the psychology of tribalism. The fact that we have a tendency both toward intense competition and toward cooperation. I maintain that natural selection naturally generates that, and that those two are in dialectic throughout natural selection. But in any event, if you have a species that doesn't have those things, it's not going to get to where we were in the first place. It's probably not that easy to find a species on Earth that doesn't have those two things, that isn't a product of this interplay between zero-sum and non-zero-sum dynamics, and doesn't evince both intensely competitive and cooperative tendencies. But
that would be a good paper. That would be a good paper. You should write that paper.
For an academic journal, which would do me no good because I'm not an academic. Is that what you mean?
Correct. And then they would reject you and you'd publish it on the web anyway.
That's what I'm doing. Why go through the journal phase?
Well, because it'll be impressive. I don't know. Okay. Well, why do we have to, why are life forms, alien life forms necessarily carbon based? Maybe they're based on something else.
That's my point. It's more generic than that. They might not be carbon, but they would still, if it was natural selection, and especially if it got life to this level of tremendous technological accomplishment, it would have to have been characterized by and engineered in keeping with this interplay between zero-sum and non-zero-sum dynamics. But I really think this Toobin thing is just keeps drawing me back. You sure we want to stay with UFOs?
I accept your answer. I want to lower the level of conversation a bit, because you had been angry at Elon Musk, I think, last week for planning an escape pod. 2 weeks for planning an escape pod. You know, he's going to Mars. He's going to leave all our problems behind. We'll destroy ourselves and blow us up. I wanted to push back on that, as they say in the business world. I want to push back on that, Bob. And
you sure you don't want to interrogate it? You could interrogate it.
Is that what they say?
That's what they say in academia.
Yeah.
I think we should interrogate that assumption.
I want to complicate it. Isn't that it?
You can complicate
English.
it?
That's English.
Why don't you push back, interrogate, and complicate?
Elon Musk, suppose Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos all escape on pods, okay? And they go to Mars. They're not going to have any fun.
No, plus we will be rid of them. In that sense, I'm in favor.
It's not going to be fun for them. They're not going to want to do it. It's like the Vanity Fair party, okay? Graydon Carter has a series of ever more exclusive parties, okay? He started with a big Vanity Fair party with a lot of drunk nobodies and a few movie stars, and he became more and more selective. You know, only movie stars, only big movie stars. And finally, the final apotheosis of Vanity Fair parties is you're alone in a room with Tom Cruise and you're bored out of your mind because you don't want to talk to Tom Cruise, okay?
Did you make it into one of these during the drunk nobodies phase? No.
No,
You don't. I'm sorry. You don't drink. That's right. Okay.
I never even made it into the. Graydon Carter is famous for saying there are 7 rooms. Okay. I never even made it into the first room. Okay. So I'm just saying, Elon Musk flees the Earth for the second room on Mars. He's not going to have any fun. Okay. Here on Earth, he's having fun. He's like putting obscene tweets up. He has a rock star girlfriend. Everybody, he has millions of people worshiping. That's fun. Being alone on Mars with Jeff Bezos, not fun. Okay? So they're not going to do it. By the way,
you know some people who disagree in a certain sense. You might think that being fired up in a rocket into orbital space with Jeff Bezos and then descending back down is not a good time either. And yet, Jeff Bezos, to his credit, did you see this announcement? He said, his company, whatever it is, Blue something. What is it? Blue Origin?
Sky, I think. Blue Origin.
No, it's not Blue Sky.
Blue Origin.
They're getting into the space tourism business and charging people ridiculous sums of money to do something slightly better than a roller coaster. You just go straight up and come down. I'm not even sure you orbit once. But anyway, he, to his credit, in the maiden flight, he's going to be on board. He's eating the dog food, man. I respect the hell out of that. But he's fucking crazy.
There's some joke about man, if you're henpecked enough by your new girlfriend, there's some
do anything.
There's
even 36 hours of solid. So anyway, there are people who are paying huge sums to be with him. You might not pay those huge sums to be with Jeff Bezos. There are people paying him.
Are they paying to go to space or to hang with Bezos?
They get to hang with him on this flight.
Right, but if the flight if it was the same flight without Bezos, with how far would the
they
price
would charge
go down?
less, I think. I don't know how it's worked. Maybe it's like a raffle or something, but they would charge. I think you would pay less once he's no longer part of it. But maybe if it doesn't go well, he'll have to go on every one as bait. That'll be what he does.
That'll
for
be
a
great.
living.
Well, he'll still have the girlfriend, so it'll still be worth it to him. I make an exception for Bezos. He may want to be on Mars, okay? But
he's got the look.
But
plus, his mentor at Princeton was this space guy, Eugene O'Neill, whose stuff used to be featured on the cover of Omni magazine. I mean, he didn't just make this up.
He wasn't. What if Jeff Bezos was a disciple of the many worlds guy?
Well,
there'd be more competitors for Amazon.
The guy, little known fact, Mickey, the guy who came up with the many worlds interpretation, Hugh Everett. Have I told you this?
He owned your house.
No, he was taught quantum physics by the guy whose family we bought the house from.
Okay. That's a little too indirect.
Well, but that guy is notable too, but we'll get into that in the pyramid.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to make my point about the Graydon Carter theory of Elon Musk. Okay, I'm ready. I'm done. Go on to your great topics, but I'm happy to talk about anything here or anything in the paragraph.
I don't have that much. I mean, I want to talk about Kamala, of course. I want a little bit about Toobin. I mean, first, give him credit for. Did you see the CNN thing?
I did. I finally played it last night.
So give him credit for what he did right. He kept his hands above the desk.
I'm going to be spending months in therapy.
Was it hard?
No, that's what he said. He's going to be spending months. He spent months.
There was Mickey. There was a great joke waiting for me there, I think, but I wisely did not seize it.
I didn't.
Well, you rewind the tape and you'll see there was this moment. I could have just done something ill-advised.
I had something to say about it too, but he's specific. Our theory was that there must have been something else that David Remnick found at the New Yorker to fire him, because it's not really enough to fire somebody from the New Yorker. After
we know about his history. That came to light. That's why I didn't think he'd be rehabilitated.
But he swore in this interview that wasn't the case. That there was nothing else in the New Yorker. It wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. He specifically said there was no prior history that hurt him. It was just
no. I don't mean that.
Just the Toobinating incident.
No, the history we know about. He got Jeff Greenfield's daughter pregnant, right?
Right.
And then I forget the exact story, whether the claim was that I think she ultimately had to sue him to get child support or something.
He initially resisted, yes.
And did he allegedly encourage an abortion or something? Not that would be the first time that's happened.
I don't want to libel anybody, so
no, I don't. But anyway, but all this stuff, people can Google it. But all that came up. The fact that a woman who apparently is well-known former book editor Judith Regan accused him of walking up and saying dirty words in her ear before she'd even met him or something. There was a bunch of stuff that came up, and it's out there. I'm not saying it.
And he says, did you hear the interview? He said that didn't play a factor in the New Yorker. It was just the incident.
I didn't watch the whole interview. I'm not like, what kind of guy do you think I am? I'm spending my time doing serious stuff. I just watched long enough to see that he was keeping his hands above the desk, and that's the main thing I was wondering.
Well, I go the extra mile, Bob, and I watched the whole thing, and he said it was not that plus the pre-existing problems. It was just that, and he also promised there were no other shoes to drop. Which seemed like a little bit of a hostage to fortune.
Well, what's he got to lose if they drop? He's toast anyway.
That's the point. If there are two women who've come forward and saying this, and he obviously, this is his routine, that means they're like, are they the only two? Probably pretty unlikely. So he's definitely at some peril. Well,
if you watch the whole thing, can you confirm my suspicion that the interviewer never asked him the two questions I would have asked him, which I think any good journalist would have asked him? What was her name? Who is she? She's
Alison Camerata.
Yeah.
I thought she asked some good questions, so go ahead.
Well, tell me she asked these.
Okay.
Why were you masturbating during a Zoom call? Did she ask that? Like, what were you doing?
Yeah.
Did she?
Yeah.
What did he say?
She asked the question, like, what were you thinking? And he said, well, I wasn't thinking at all.
Yeah, no. You got to follow up. You got to say, no, I want to know what had aroused you.
Right. What porn site had you dialed into? She didn't
or was there a woman on the line? And then the other thing is, he says it was so stupid and so wrong. I would, as they say, interrogate and complicate the it's so wrong answer by saying, I'm genuinely interested. What would he say is deeply wrong about it? Is masturbation deeply wrong? I mean, if it is, he shouldn't be back. Is masturbation per se deeply wrong? Was the fact that his wife was in the next room and didn't know about it deeply wrong? Or was there some extenuating circumstance that made it deeply wrong? Was there another woman involved? Was it a woman? Whatever. It's seriously interesting question. What are the norms on this? I
think he'd have an answer to that, and at some point he'd say what he said self-servingly in his Clinton book, which is, adultery tells you nothing about a person's character, Bob. It's just a prurient exercise by the press to find out tawdry gossip.
That's what he said about Clinton?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was
How convenient.
It was very convenient. Very convenient. He also slimed my friend Mike Isikoff.
Yeah, but you resented him before that, right?
No, that was the source. That was the initial, I think.
You don't just resent his success because you both went to fancy law schools and he's like getting paid to talk about law and you're talking to me.
Of course I resent that, but, I can resent a whole lot of people more than him. I was his only friend in Washington. I tell you that when his book came out trashing the special prosecutor Walsh, while the case was still pending, when he'd been on Walsh's staff in violation of all rules of legal ethics, okay, even Washington, as decadent and immoral a place it is, turned on Jeff Toobin and said, this guy's broken an ethical bar. And nobody turned up at his book party except me.
You were the one person
There was only one person unethical enough to turn up at his book party, and that was me.
Seriously?
As an act of
This is like Graydon Carter's Seventh Room.
I may have come late. I'm sure there were other people at the book party, but it sure seemed like it was mighty empty. And
so you know him.
I knew him to say hi. You
could email him my questions.
No, I suppose I could if I had his email. He's friends with friends of mine, and Kinsley. I think Kinsley pulled his piece out of the slush pile because it was so well written, and he says, "I've discovered this guy. He's a good writer." Okay.
Wait, Mike Kinsley discovered he inflicted Jeff Toobin on? No, I shouldn't say inflicted. He's fine. He's fine.
I think he I would say inflicted. Yes, I think Kinsley played a part in inflicting Jeff Toobin on us.
You know who else? You know who else? And I played a role in this, maybe. Paul Krugman had been purely an academic, not a columnist to speak of. He emailed me to get Mike Kinsley's email address so he could approach him about writing a column for Slate. I don't know if you remember, but that's how this started. That's how Krugman, the columnist, started.
And if you hadn't given him the email, he would have just given up.
It's a kill Hitler in the crib question, man. Should I have not answered that email?
Well, there you go. I'm happy that Toobin survived, A, because, what he did probably wasn't enough to get fired. It's pretty bad. But B, he's the gift that keeps on giving. He'll generate more headlines. And the headlines all have the word masturbation in it, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's a long word, Bob. It takes up half the headline.
How many letters does onanism?
Onanism. There you go. They'll discover that. That's shorter. That saves them. Yeah,
but physical media are dead anyway, so it does. The letters don't really cost anything. Too bad we have an onanism comeback.
It bumps their limits on the web too. You can't Anyway, I'm amazed at the number of headlines that says Toobin masturbation scandal. It's like, okay. Anyway, so I'm happy for him. He'll be continued grist for all of us.
I'll be watching.
I
actually won't, but so what else? Should we stay as frothy as possible and move on to Kamala? That's the closest thing to froth.
Well, let's move to Kamala. That's a step in the serious direction.
Step toward gravitas. So what did you think of, I mean, there's two Kamala moments. There's the one where she tells people in Central America not to come to America, and she took heat from the left. And then there's the moment, the weird Lester Holt, I guess it is, interview where he says, you haven't been to the border, have you? And she says, we have been to the border. He says, but you haven't. Normally, when we use the word we, it includes the person speaking. So that's kind of odd. And then she says, and then finally she says, well, I haven't been to Europe. Kind of as a kind of semi-joke or something that is a non sequitur.
There was a good Bridget Fetisi tweet about a wife telling her husband, you didn't go to the husband telling his wife, you didn't go to the grocery store, and the wife goes, well, I haven't been to Europe either. Like, I don't know. So what? She's obviously. It seems to be clear to me she has an incompetent staff. They screwed up the campaign, and they react in very crude, like inadequate fashion. That's obviously the question she's going to get. That she hadn't thought through a better answer is, who cares about her answer to this? She obviously is not up to that sort of job, which is like the basic job of a politician, coming up with a good answer. On the the border issue, who cares if she's gone to the border? That's not an issue. I mean, it's basically
that's
the
why
press,
it's a weird stumble.
The press demanding that she's gone to the border until she goes to the border and the press complaint goes away. That's not the complaint about the immigration policy.
No, but I think that she failed to, that's precisely why her failure to handle it well is a little alarming if she is the odds-on favorite to be the Democratic presidential candidate.
I agree. I don't think she's, not sure she's the odds-on favorite anymore.
The odds are not moving in her favor.
On the first one, at first I thought, gee, this is a heartening sign that Biden is moving in a sensible direction. He realizes that the immigration disaster unfolding on the border is hurting him in the polls. It's still going on. And as he's done in a couple of instances, he's showing he's moving a little back toward normalcy. But then I thought, no, they always go down to Central America and say, don't come. And everybody knows that has no weight at all, because as Todd Bensman, a very good reporter down there, says, what matters is they get cell phone calls from their relatives to say, I made it across. It's easy. Here I am in San Francisco. I'm with our family. You should come too. And that's what carries weight, not Kamala saying don't come. And the president of Guatemala, I think, said the same thing, basically. So it was just an obvious ineffectual piece of BS. And the fact that she's getting attacked from the left for it is completely insane. What's she supposed to say? You should come? No. It's crazy that AOC and those people are saying the administration is not being permissive enough. I just think they marginalize themselves more and more when they say that.
Well, as a political matter, I guess I would just say they're probably not giving her the kinds of feedback that will increase the chances of a Democrat winning the general election next time. But that's a common dynamic in party politics.
Well, I think they're trying to push back from the other side so the Biden position doesn't change. But I keep waiting for them to fire Ali Mayorkas and at least seem to move back toward the center. And to stop the flood of people coming in. Just briefly, the statistics showed basically this month was the same as last month. The statistics are complicated because there was a slight decrease in women and children coming, but there was an increase in single adults coming. The single adult figure is suspect because a lot of those people are repeat offenders. So you can't. All the figures the press talks about are basically mired in complications. But the key thing is they aren't the important figures. The important figures are the single men and single women who are sneaking across the border undetected. They're not in those figures at all. And we don't know how many of them there are, but we have reason to think that over the course of a year or 2 years, they're in the millions. So the figure that, 170,000 came last month, that's also a figure in the millions, but there's this other million that we don't even detect. So the problem is still huge.
I have a question. Has the number in kind of absolute terms of Mexicans crossing the border dropped in the last few decades, like long-term trend?
It dropped and then it picked up. For about 8 years, it was falling steadily as the Mexican economy was growing, and it was being replaced by Central Americans. But lately, the Mexicans have started to come again.
Because the economy's doing badly again?
Well, that's one theory. And the other theory is because the border became noticeably more porous. And Biden issued La Invitación.
I would attach some significance to the Mexican economy.
Obviously it's important, but if it's obviously not as good as the American economy, or else the Central Americans would stop in Mexico. They actually wouldn't be welcome there, but they could try.
Yeah. So all I ask is that Joe Biden. I actually asked two things. First, I asked that he not run for president again, because I just think the age and cognitive
he's doing
issues.
Better than I expected, though.
He's doing okay. I just think that they're going to be pretty steep hills to climb in 3 years. I could be wrong, but the main thing I was going to say is, if he's not going to run, please let us know well in advance of the general election, more than a year in advance of the general election, because I just don't think Kamala should be allowed to waltz in. She faces, she's not even that well liked by Democrats. The left hates her. And there are a lot of people who just don't react that positively to her. And I thought this one moment actually captured some of the reason.
Yeah, I agree. But the problem is, as soon as he does it, he becomes a lame duck. So he's not going to do it until after they lose the Congress, if they lose the Congress.
Oh, yeah. Well, you wouldn't do it before that.
Yeah. He's not going to do it before the midterms.
No, but I think within like 7-8 months of those elections, he's got to tell us.
But there are all these reporters who seem to have fairly complicated conversations with him. It's not like he's senile. So, my theory is that age has helped him. He used to be an irresponsible blowhard. He has much less energy. He knows his limits. He realizes he has to focus only on the task at hand. He doesn't go off on immature jags, and he's humble. He's just so much better semi-senile than he was when he was completely all there. And a better president. I mean, it's not like, it's not like, I don't think
he wasn't president before he was semi-senile, Mickey. It's kind of hard to do that.
He would have been if he'd won in 1988.
Who knows? The job matures a person. Look at Trump.
It would have to do a hell of a job in 1988. That's all.
Speaking of Trump, what's his status in your circles these days? Is he?
Good question. In my circles, we're for Trumpism without Trump. So we hope he somehow fades away and yet somehow turns out the vote in the midterms. So it's that's sort of a contradictory thing. And he's obviously the last thing he wants to do is fade away and turn out the vote. He'd much rather not fade away and not turn out the vote. So he's still a problem. I mean, he's if I could press a button and make him disappear, I think I would press a button, and so would most of the people who I trust on the right. But there is no button. So he gives a speech, he's ridiculed, he's mocked, but it doesn't seem to hurt him. There was actually a very moving...
Helps him, probably.
There was a very moving passage an anti-war passage in the speech, actually, for all its problems, which, I didn't hear all of it, but he looked horrible, his pants were unpressed, people were theorizing.
But they were not on backwards.
No, but was he wearing a diaper, Bob? That was the other theory.
Well, what was the story with the picture of the pants? I mean, first of all, I got to admit, I fell for it. I actually...
You thought they were backwards?
Well, the first picture they circulated, it looked pretty, like it was like, as George Tenet would say, it was a slam dunk. They were backwards.
The pants were a mess, but they didn't look like they were in backwards. Anyway, there was this but in the middle of it, he gave a very moving thing about going to It may have been completely apocryphal. Maybe he made it up. It doesn't matter. He about going to Dover Air Force Base to welcome the bodies home, and he talks to the parents, and the parents are going on about how their son was a wonderful guy and what a great baseball arm he had, and blah blah blah. And he tells the general, "Well, I talked to these parents. They seem all right. They seem fine." And the general goes, "They're not." And Trump doesn't understand it. And then the bodies come, and the parents go berserk, and they're crying and wailing and hurling themselves on the coffin, and it's actually quite moving. And so he's still capable of doing impressive rhetoric, and he's the only person pissing on Biden over the border consistently. So it's all a mixed bag.
Before you steer this toward immigration, can I steer it just very briefly toward the issue of military engagement and Afghanistan, which was probably may have been the context for those parents reacting. I said some time ago on this podcast when Biden said, "Okay, we're out of Afghanistan by September 11th," that they were leaving a loophole for explicitly for counterterrorism. Like if we want to launch drone strikes or airstrikes for, kill like anti-American terrorists. And I said that loophole was big enough to keep them engaged just in fighting off the Taliban on behalf of the government. And now they are talking about that. Here's a tweet from Kelly Vlahos about a piece suggesting an internal, quote, debate over whether we will be giving Afghans air support to fight the Taliban after we leave. So that is apparently being debated in, I guess, in the White House. And I just note that with some
And if we get, and your argument is we shouldn't give air support even if we can do it at no risk to ourselves?
I'm afraid it is. I just think it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know. I've never gotten a divorce, but I suppose there are situations where it's like the marriage is so bad, it's actually it makes long-term sense to get out of it, but you always flinch because in the short term, it's so painful. And in this case, that would mean, people dying. I'm not trying to minimize it, but of course, in the long term, it means people dying, as long as there's a civil war raging. So, in other words, not, us not doing anything. People are going to die either way. It's hard to say which way most people die. But anyway, this is a piece by Adam Weinstein in Responsible Statecraft that people can check out. U.S. debating future air support for Afghans against Taliban. And
he's against it, obviously.
Yeah, Responsible Statecraft is the the media outlet of the Quincy Institute, and they're pretty anti-intervention.
It degenerates into decent intervalism. In other words, after when we were in Vietnam, there was this theory that Nixon and Kissinger knew that Vietnam would fall when we got out to the north, but they just wanted a decent interval. So, it's sort of save face for us, and B, it created some confusion as was our pullout really why it fell? Well, there was a decent interval. So is Biden, if we do airstrikes, is it because we really want to stop a terrorist threat against America, or because we want a decent interval? We want to tell the Taliban, look, don't be in such a hurry. Wait a decent interval until after we leave before you take over Kabul. I would think both factors would obviously be at work.
I think the average politician is going to be hoping for a decent interval at worst. Our getting out of Vietnam involved such memorable moments as Kissinger. I think he was relaying an order by Nixon, and the way he put it, this is, I think, on tape or something to whoever he was instructing, whatever military officer was, we want anything that flies to bomb anything that moves. You could wind up killing a lot of people that way.
Let me lower the level of discussion. There was this singer named B.J. Thomas, Raindrops Are Falling on My Head, who died a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did he die?
He died, and he had an anti-war song directly about the decent interval. It was the chorus was, what kind of logic and what kind of brain would not think it's insane, blah, 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 who would choose to kill millions for an honorable peace. It was directly about the decent interval, and it was pulled from the airways after about a week.
Really?
And it disappeared into, like, I tweeted about it, and only one guy even remembered it. But, you know, this is like and we didn't hear from B.J. Thomas again for a long time.
Well, he separately had, I remember reading a little bit of his autobiography or something. He had a drug problem, and by his account, a devastating career moment was when he was on the Tonight Show, and he was I think he was on speed or something. And Carson said, how do you do it? You know, you keep going, you do all these concerts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And he felt ebullient enough to just say drugs. And he thought it was like a laugh line.
It is a laugh line.
Well, it should be. But by his account, that was like a devastating moment. And it was a moment of reckoning. And he got off drugs. And by the way, one of his most famous songs is a drug metaphor, Hooked on a Feeling. Yeah. Remember that song?
But yes. But anyway, he had a very, very precisely targeted, sophisticated anti-war song about exactly what we're talking about.
I will check it out.
It's not, you can't dance to it. It's not that good a song, but it is.
I'm not that kind of guy anyway. Don't worry.
He didn't do as badly as Arthur Godfrey, as the guy who killed his career by dissing Arthur Godfrey on Arthur Godfrey's show.
Who did that?
Some guy you never heard from again.
With good damn reason.
It's like he talked back to Arthur Godfrey and his career was over.
I hope we have that moment on tape.
Well, that moment is on tape, but it's a famous moment.
Excellent.
It's like talking back to Andy Griffith on A Face in the Crowd. You don't do it.
No.
Anyway, so I learned that. I talked back to some radio show.
Yeah.
Like I was on, they booked me, and then they started talking about immigration. And they said, Mickey, would you leave? We have too many people in the room. And I said, but this is the only thing I bitched a bit. I said, this is the only thing I know anything about. And I was never asked back.
Huh.
Never complain.
There's a lot of places I've never been asked back to.
Never complain.
There's a lot. So, not totally unrelated to Afghanistan. What's your take on Ilhan Omar, the attempt to by the Democratic leadership to shut her the hell up?
What she said her question at the hearing, which is, shouldn't all these crimes be investigated?
Yeah,
seems inoffensive. I wouldn't. Why go after her for that? Then she tweeted and said, Israel, Hamas, the U.S. are all guilty of unthinkable war crimes or atrocities.
There
you are. In that tweet, you are accusing Israel and the United States of unthinkable atrocities.
Of course. So, you're saying they've never done
that? Unthinkable atrocities? I would say the atrocities are sort of...
Does the name Sabra and Shatila mean anything to you?
I would say there's a different level of...
she didn't say it was the same level.
Atrocities. We're on that list too, Bob.
America.
Did we do Sabra and Shatila?
No, that was Ariel Sharon. I mean, he let these Christians into these Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, knowing exactly what they were going to do, and what they did was kill a ton of people, civilians.
My instinct is
we've done stuff, and we've done stuff recently. I mean, we've done, but anyway, the tweet is.
Feel free to give an example.
Her tweet is, first of all, her tweet is, we must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and Taliban. She's not saying they've committed equal numbers of atrocities or equal magnitude or anything, but the answer with America is, the further back in history you go, the bigger the atrocities can be. I would say the example I just gave you, kind of aimlessly bombing Cambodia to buy us a little fucking political time, is pretty egregious. But even, if you're just talking qualitatively and not quantitatively, your man, Donald Trump, this Navy SEAL guy who just murdered a captive in flagrant violation of the laws of war, committed a war crime so disgusting that his own subordinates broke the code of silence and reported him. He was exonerated by President Trump. President Trump was the president. So the government of the United States said, this is cool. This is cool. We just kill people in captivity. Okay.
Was Trump president when the atrocity was committed?
What the hell does it matter? He probably was, but what does it matter?
Well, because I think the atrocity was the killing, not so much as the exoneration.
Look, when the president of the United States says it's cool to kill captives in cold blood, how is that not an atrocity that the United States has committed?
He didn't necessarily say that. He might have said, I believe whatever story this guy cooked up to
That's
justify
fucking
it.
Bullshit. And look, I mean, go back as far as you want. I mean, we dropped atom bombs on people. The point is, it's not, of course, the main blowback that she's getting is probably about Israel. She's being accused of being anti-Semitic, right?
Yes.
And I mean, look, Tom Friedman, just let me finish it. After the 2014 war in Gaza, which killed about 10 times as many people as the most recent one, Tom Friedman wrote, Israel is sending a message. We are willing to commit war crimes if you keep messing with us. He wrote that. Now, he may have later walked it back under pressure, but it's what he believed. And he's not some kind of flaming anti-Israel lefty.
Did he say they had committed war crimes, or they were willing?
Yeah.
No, he says they are.
No,
so
he said they had committed the war crimes by. I mean, this is what the only thing the sentence could mean is they committed war because they didn't say it. They didn't literally say it. He's saying they said it by doing it. We are willing to commit war crimes if you keep messing with us.
My instinct is always to defend Ilhan Omar against all these attacks, but I thought that tweet went a little too far. She took it down. She could just say. An overenthusiastic intern tweeted it.
That would be a lie.
They made her eat. Well, we don't know.
Well,
and they made her eat more shit than was deserved, and they're still making her eat.
Oh yeah, Pelosi and Hoyer officially denounced her, and I'm sorry, there's just nothing untrue in it. And moreover, it shouldn't be the case that if you criticize both the U.S. and Israel, even in extreme terms, that people can safely accuse you of being anti-Semitic. You should be allowed to criticize countries.
Pelosi's statement was particularly badly worded. She says, I believe in robust debate and free speech, but false equivalent falls outside that. No, it doesn't. Free speech involves the right to make false equivalencies.
Well, there's also this weird thing. She says, drawing false equivalencies between democracies like the U.S. and Israel and groups that engage in terrorism, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what does the democracies thing have to do with it? Either we have committed the atrocities or we haven't. It doesn't help if we're democracies and we've committed them.
Well, Elon, you're safe with us.
No, yeah, on that question, on the Elon question, my point is just that this is not a rescue mission for the species. It's a rescue mission for a very small number of.
I was talking about
people.
Ilhan Omar, not Elon Musk.
Oh, Ilhan.
Elon, yes.
Yes, no, Elon. So should we talk? Should we get into some boring policy, like infrastructure? Well, go ahead. Take the lead.
No, it's sort of like we can talk. There's sort of a pyramid of gravitas where we have to go through we have to have a lot of cheap gossip in order to justify reaching the heights of
what is the height?
Boring.
What is the height this week?
I think the height may be fucking infrastructure.
Well, if it's literally fucking infrastructure, that's a great segue from Toobin or something.
Yeah, no, it's infrastructure. I have there's sort of a congressional sort of situation or recap. What's up with Congress? That I thought I had under control, which is he's basically things are drifting to toward the Democrats sort of wanting to put and having to put, because they only have one chance, everything in this one big reconciliation bill for which they have to get basically all their troops on board. Okay. And that is sort of the direction that the progressives, I guess, would be pushing Biden, and Biden is resisting and pursuing these bipartisan talks for a much smaller, hard infrastructure package with Kyrsten Sinema and 9 others. And they claim to have come to some sort of minimal agreement. We don't know whether Biden is just stringing them along, intending for it to fail, and then he can move to the big reconciliation package, or if he really wants to do it. The argument for it is if he really wants to do it because he has to please Sinema and Manchin to get them on board for the big reconciliation package. But if stringing Sinema along and then pulling the rug out from under her, that's not going to please her. So why is that such a brilliant strategy? I do think, and also the other thing is,
doesn't he just want to show her he tried? She's saying you got to try first. She has to be able to tell her constituents we tried.
They aren't happy when he moves the goalpost. That's what Capito complained, that he moved the goalpost a couple times. So in order to sabotage the bipartisan talks, he might have to move the goalpost. What he's doing now is something I think completely crazy, which is one of the ways they've proposed to fund it is by a increase in the gas tax. Okay? Which serves all sorts of liberal goals. You increase the gas tax, that means electric vehicles, which they're pushing, become more economical. It means people drive less. It's good for the economy. Yet Biden is resisting it because he says it violates his campaign pledge not to tax anybody under $400,000. Does he really believe that? Does he really believe that would be a potent issue for the Republicans? Does he really want to be the first president not to go back on his tax pledge during the campaign? I mean, that can't be the reason he's resisting. It must be that he's trying to throw a monkey wrench into these talks somehow.
Well,
and push it toward
you said it's a gas tax?
Yeah.
The gas tax is a pretty regressive tax. I mean, almost any flat consumer tax that's not somehow adjusted for income is regressive in the sense of taking a larger percentage of low-income people's paychecks than higher incomes. But a gas tax, especially because so many, working people, it's like increasingly, upper class people are working from home and stuff. It's the working class that buys gas, So I think it makes sense for a Democratic president to resist that.
They haven't cited that, and I just can't believe they can make it up in progressivity through some other means. All they want to do is index the gas tax for inflation. And since inflation is going to be big, I guess it brings in a lot of money.
That's the whole.
I don't know. I'm against measuring every little jot and tittle of the budget by whether it individually is regressive or progressive. But
there we differ. But I have a question on.
Well, if he traded off, I increase the gas tax and I double the tax on people over $400,000. The net outcome is progressive. You should take that deal. You don't want to take that deal because every component has to be progressive?
Well, I mean, first I'd say there is virtue in a gas tax for environmental reasons. And if you can do the equivalent of that, with a progressive, a guy who was a professor of mine in college and died under tragic and bizarre circumstances was one of the leading kind of designers of a progressive consumption tax. So I know it is possible, but I don't know how you would operationalize it. A gas tax is the kind of thing that, in terms of carbon, it's justified, but it falls so heavily on low income people that I don't like it.
Anyway, the development this week was finally you were hearing complaints from Democrats. This morning that they're reluctant to pass everything through a big, massive reconciliation bill. So that there's some grumbling among the troops that maybe would suggest that Biden doesn't have the votes. He has to keep everybody in line. So that might encourage him to pursue this bipartisan thing. Of course, if you do the hard infrastructure, which is the popular part through a bipartisan deal, doesn't that reduce the pressure to, that's supposed to be the engine pulling the train of everything every liberal wants the government to spend money on. Once you do the popular parts, are the votes going to be there to do the less popular parts, including this horrible, by my mind, child tax credit, which is the reinstatement of welfare? Is that all going to pass just because there's party discipline, even though you've already done the popular thing? I don't know. There has to be a debate in the White House on this. And they also have to have better information than we do. I mean, Schumer must know who's on board and who's not. He must have.
Well, the other thing I don't totally understand is why are they equating getting Republican support with not doing reconciliation? I mean, first of all, in principle, well, two things. I mean, if you only got 5 Republicans, that would give Sinema and Manchin a little cover, right? And then you could go through reconciliation. And secondly, if you can't get Manchin and Sinema to play ball or just get Manchin to play ball, can't you just get one Republican and go through reconciliation?
Wait, so what baffles you? I mean, obviously,
well, it seems like everybody is saying
they would like to get one Republican.
Yeah, well, it seems that's not what I'm hearing though. Everybody's saying like they're equating getting Republican support with not going through reconciliation. Like if they get Republican support, it has to be 10 Republicans. Now I can imagine various cases where fewer than 10 comes in handy. Am I just missing the stories where they talk about that, or what?
The compromise they're talking about is not through reconciliation. It's just a bill that would be passed with.
But isn't Sinema still looking for 10 Republicans? No?
I guess in theory, she and Manchin are looking for 10 Republicans, yes. And the answer is, why would the Republicans agree to do that if the Democrats were just going to pass everything else through reconciliation anyway? Obviously, an unspoken condition of agreeing to that is somehow limits on what the Democrats are going to push through on reconciliation. Otherwise, it'd be insane for them to agree.
Well, unless it's
you
good
want
politics.
A and B, and you say, you give me A and I'm going to take B anyway. Well, why should they give you A? Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, if you give some goodies to Mitt Romney or Lisa Murkowski that they can brag to their constituents about.
But that would involve just going right to reconciliation. That doesn't involve a bill that passes through regular process. McConnell is just going to say, if he thinks, if McConnell doesn't like it, he gives sort of an order, don't vote for this. And it's quite hard to defy. I think Murkowski could defy it, but, it's not like it's not easy to get a whole lot of people. So they could get 1 or 2 and that would give them room to maneuver on reconciliation. But, the big question is, if you have a huge bill with 100 moving parts that we talked about last week, is it harder to pass or easier to pass? And I think it's turning out it's harder to pass because there's something everybody can object to. So even if you get 2 Republicans to sign on to it with all these 100 controversial provisions, it's going to be hard to get the other 48 Democrats you need because there are all these controversial positions. So, and some of which are going to be very, very important to local constituents, and nobody's going to want to sacrifice their seat. And I think the pressure is actually worse in the House. I've been saying this, and nobody's contradicted to me, but it may be just because this is so obviously crazy. It's harder for Pelosi to pass a reconciliation bill in the House than it is for Schumer to pass a reconciliation bill in the Senate, because Pelosi has a little margin, but they're all up for election every election, and they're all very responsive to local concerns. And there's going to be something in the bill that's going to piss off the constituents of enough Democrats to make it hard for Pelosi to pull together a majority, even though the House is a more disciplined place than the Senate.
Well, if you're right, you should wind up getting a lot of credit because nobody is saying that but you, right? You should amplify it a little just to make sure you get the credit.
Okay.
Is anybody else saying that?
Not that I've read, but it may be that the House. I may be underestimating the power of Pelosi wields. I mean, the House is much, much more disciplined. So if they send out a "you must vote for this" order, it's generally followed, but not always.
Well, if you are right about that, you should win a Pulitzer. Speaking of which, did you notice that right before we started taping, the Pulitzers were announced?
Oh dear, no, that's the opposite of Schadenfreude.
And
it's not a happy day.
Your life is the opposite of Schadenfreude, Mickey.
No, not with Jeffrey Toobin around.
No, he is.
Jeffrey Toobin is
okay, but until
Mr.
his great
Schadenfreude.
fall, your relationship to him was the opposite of Schadenfreude. Why am I pronouncing it that way? Is that the way it's pronounced?
The fall took deliciously long to happen. That just made it suspenseful.
Anyway, I'm predicting that in your Twitter feed, more than in my Twitter feed, there will be complaining about how woke the Pulitzers are.
Were they woke this year?
Well, Pretty. I just kind of glanced. I mean, as far as the newspaper ones, it's kind of, COVID, George Floyd, and I haven't looked into the ethnicity of the individual people on them. But when you get down to like fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, it's pretty much down the line. I mean, just in terms of the themes, the identities of the winners, and so on, which is fine with me. But I think
that's been true for a while, hasn't it?
There's been it's a pretty socially conscious group of folk, but I guess that award those. But I would say I'm guessing that you will hear people say it is, depending on your perspective, worse this year or better this year than usual.
Well, that's in the break between this and the Parrot Room, we can look at the list and find.
Yeah, you can
find more to bitch
you
about.
You can spend the whole Parrot Room exhibiting the opposite of Schadenfreude.
You'd like that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, what would that be? How is that what is that the opposite of? Anyway, what did you finally, just as long as we're venturing in the direction of cancel culture, did you see the thing about the authors? It was in Slate. It was actually interesting because it was in Slate. And it was Slate writing a piece about how wokeness having gone too far in the eyes of the person from Slate writing about it.
And that person wasn't Will Salatin.
A person was Laura Miller.
Oh, okay.
I believe is the name. And then did she used to write for Newsweek?
I don't know. Where have they finally gone too far for Slate?
It's these, a couple of, well, at least in one of them, there's the intimation that she feels that way. I forget what she says about the other one. It's the one thing about lines, authors saying, "Oh, you're right. I'll remove this line from subsequent issues of the novel." And now here is one. I want to read this to you, and I want you to guess what the complaint about it was that led the author to vow to remove it.
Okay.
It's a gay romance novel published in 2019, in which a supporting character who is the president of the United States complains, quote, this is the president of the United States talking in this novel, quote, "Well, my UN ambassador fucked up his one job and said something idiotic about Israel, and now I have to call Netanyahu and personally apologize." That's the line that's leaving. Now, guess what the complaint is?
There's the obvious complaint, which is the Ilhan Omar style complaint.
Well, finish that thought, because it turns out the complaint is the opposite of that. But in other words, they are saying that Israel controls like America is too indulgent of Israel or something, and that's like a trope or something, right?
Right.
That's what you would think. No, the complaints were that this normalizes, one commenter said, this normalizes the genocide and war crimes done by Israel that will always be backed up and unashamedly supported by America. Another Twitter user explained that mentions of Israel, especially when they're completely unnecessary as well, such as in books, films, shows, normalize the occupation of Palestine.
So did they even mention existence? Israel's like Taiwan. You can't even mention it.
I guess that's the line. Now, Laura Miller notes that, do I have this here? Oh, she says it seemingly doesn't matter that the line clearly reads as a gentle satire of the United States' overly deferential foreign policy. So what is troubling to me is that this suggests that there may be people on the left who don't have a sense of humor. I mean, they don't understand that this is a comment that is assuming the form of satire, right?
You somehow wonder if these bandwagons just start and nobody even bothers to go back and read the original text. They just feel they have to get on the bandwagon. But I accept your critique, and I assume if that's Laura Miller's critique, it
is.
Sounds reasonable. It just sounds like a lame scene. I mean, it sounds like one of these dramas written by Sidney Blumenthal that's very well informed and don't work as dramas. But
has Sid written a novel?
There was some play he redid and it was produced in L.A., and it was all very, very smart and knowledgeable and just did not work as drama. It was excruciating. So I forget.
And you sat through it. Was he there when you sat through it?
I believe so.
Painful.
Luckily, there were many other people in the room.
They didn't ask you to speak about it afterwards.
No, and I could make a quick exit. I may even have exited before.
Always sit near the back when the author is present.
In L.A., that's sometimes not possible. Sometimes you're watching in a small room, and the director greets you at the exit, and you have to say something to him. And the rule is lie. Do not try to be clever and say, I've never seen anything like it before. Or, you really did it, didn't you?
Or provocative.
Don't say that. Just say, it's brilliant.
I read your book with interest.
Just lie.
Yeah. No, always lie. That is, I think if there's one message we should leave the more youthful members of our audience with today, it's always be lying.
It's a testament to human nature that it takes people a while to come to this realization. They all feel like, oh, I should say something honest that placates the director, but is truthful. No, you'll never do that.
No, she just lie.
Yeah. As a friend of mine once said, when he finally, at the age of 60, told his mother he was doing something that he wasn't actually doing, he goes, lying. Why didn't I think of that before? Anyway, okay.
I actually work pretty hard to not lie. Especially when it comes to like why you can't do something, like why you can't attend something or other. I don't just make shit up. I indulge in clever wordplay.
Well, you always have your newsletter. You know, say I'm doing my newsletter.
Speaking of which, yeah.
Anyway, there's some serious topics I have on my list.
Well, you better hurry. We've been doing this an hour, man.
Well, we can talk about it in the Parrot Room. We have natalism.
Oh,
why do we need more? Why do we need more babies? We have, is democracy dying? There was this letter. There was an article by Tom Edsel, and I actually read the Texas law, and there actually were two things that troubled me about it. It's basically anodyne, but there were two things in the Texas law. I didn't think it was like a nothing burger. There's that. There's more on. There's a theory of the COVID origin that sort of synthesizes the lab leak and the wet market.
Oh, that's great Parrot Room material.
Okay.
COVID origin synthesis.
And then there's Mickey's review of ideas that would make good newsletters, but he's going to piss them away in the Parrot Room and not make any money off them.
No, that's a good way to test them. Test market them, see what the people say, see if we can get anybody in the Parrot Room to throw money in your direction.
They always say that's a good idea. You should write a newsletter about it, and then I am too lazy to write a newsletter. So
these are pieces, newsletter pieces, or newsletters.
They would be items. They would be items.
Yeah, I need an item idea. I got to write something tomorrow, and so we will brainstorm in the Parrot Room about what we're going to write. This is, folks, at patreon.com/Parrot Room, where you will find all of this. So we said we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Is it the Vanity Fair piece?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to say a little bit about that. We're going to talk about you. Yeah.
Go ahead. I feel like we should talk about one more thing in the free. Maybe you're wrong in this free version. Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and summarize what we're going to say in the Parrot Room, and then we'll talk about one more thing.
Okay. We have Epstein, Hunter. And
Hunter.
So that's two of the three.
I want to, having complimented Slate's Laura Miller, I want to complain bitterly a little more about their podcast Slow Burn and accuse them of, crimes against humanity and stuff. And then we said we're going to talk more about UFOs. I think there's a complaint about David Sanger. I was going to work into this, but we're kind of running long.
Do we have anything more to say about UFOs? I don't think we do.
I thought you said we did. I guess we went down that rabbit hole, didn't we?
We went down the rabbit hole, yeah.
I'll probably think of something, though. It's endlessly fascinating.
There's this weird Georgia ballot thing, which is we can talk about.
Weird Georgia ballot.
This judge has given Trump a small peg to hang his hat on.
Well, he has, you know what they say, small hands, small hat.
Yeah. And that's basically it. Hydroxychloroquine is back.
About time. I've been wondering, is that not something that was successful and has been hushed up?
It's a mystery to me, but go ahead.
Because such was the animus toward Trump when he first tried to flack it, I thought really media was kind of avoiding any good news about it. But I don't know. There's been enough time you'd think good news would have broken through. But seems to be some possibly bad news on the what is it? The Delta variant of COVID? Is that the one that's hitting England and seems a little more challenging than some of the others? Also, a number of states are no longer reporting their COVID data daily. So the data is a little harder to follow on a day-by-day basis. But we're still, deaths are still kind of, I would say, plateauing at what is, compared to the last 15 months, a low level.
We also have Mara Gay, is that how you pronounce her name, at the New York Times complaining about trucks that fly flags.
Oh, yes. Trucks that fly. I vaguely remember this. Trucks that fly flags. So Jeffrey Epstein complained about Slate, complained about David Sanger, COVID synthesis. What should we write?
Hunter.
Weird Georgia ballot thing. Trucks that fly flags. Hunter. I said Hunter. We'll do more. Okay, but what is our so what is the thing you want to close with?
Well, I just thought Jim Garrity, his theory of COVID is that it's in the lab and they flush it down the sewer, and the sewer goes through the wet market, and they use the sewer. They use some form of sewer water to do something in the wet market as like a cooking oil or something in the wet market. Mm-hmm. So that's both. It's a lab leak. It's a wet market. That would explain
Grand unified theory. This is the gut we've been waiting for.
That would explain why they found it all over the wet market, and so many people who went to the wet market got it. And yet, it would also explain how it got to the wet market without a human transmission, getting somebody getting sick in the lab and bringing it there, and without an intermediate animal, since they can't find the intermediate animal.
You would think they wouldn't make a habit in a lab like this of just flushing stuff down the drain, but I guess it could have happened accidentally and somebody failed to follow the normal procedure.
It's better than my racist trope that they sold the lab animals for food.
I remember that.
I've actually gotten slightly to the bottom of that. It was from a New York Post article by a guy named Stephen Mosher, who is not completely credible from his bio because he's obviously an advocate from the Heartland Institute. He's some kind of anti-China advocate. And I think there is a case of a guy a prominent scientist who pled guilty to selling lab animals for profit. But he was a cloning expert. The animals were like cows and pigs and milk that were not necessarily infected, but they were maybe cloned or something. So it was like a step less disgusting than selling infected lamb animals. Mm-hmm. But he did plead guilty, and that's the origin of the rumor that got to my ears and so offended.
And that's the reason it's not racist for you to repeat it.
Well, it's not racist for me to repeat it if I'm saying it is possibly racist. And apparently the rules against what you could do with lab animals were pretty lax here until like not too long ago. So it's not doesn't necessarily mean you're a horrible, decadent, never to be civilized country. It just means you're 10 years behind us.
Hey, plus people are eating cicadas even as we speak, Mickey, right here in America.
Not you.
Not me, but my dogs it's like Every hour is picnic hour for my dogs.
Crunch all you want. We'll make more.
Although I got to say, we have reached peak cicada. They seem not to be crawling out of the ground anymore, and some die every day. So I think we're headed down.
I mean, I've only seen this. Why are not more people? Maybe am I asleep? Why are more people not analogizing the cicadas coming out of their holes with Americans coming out of isolation after the pandemic? I only saw one person doing that, and it's such an obvious cliched metaphor that nobody's doing it. It's so cliched, it's never becoming cliched.
You should have won a Pulitzer with a mind like that today. You should have won a Pulitzer.
It's a self-degrading cliche.
I'd write that piece. I would write that piece pronto. You know what? Quickly, I want to show you some of my fine cicada art, but there is one that I'm not going to show you because that's for the Parrot Room, okay? So and by the way, this is a great camera on my Huawei smartphone that took this wonderful picture. Now I'm going to show this to you. This is like some super great cicada art. You see that?
I think that's what Jeffrey Toobin was looking at that day.
Well, I got to say, I get
that is very moving.
Frisson when I look at it in my loins, in fact. But this is the one I'm showing here on this podcast. But in the Parrot Room, you know what I'm going to show you, Mickey? Yes.
Cicadas having sex.
Bingo. That's the bonus content. And don't guess how they do it. You may have seen the pictures. It's counterintuitive.
Really?
It's wild. Even Jeffrey Toobin would consider this wild. It's highly counterintuitive. And I've got really great photos. Okay, well, very graphic. Cicadas having sex. But you're not going to get it for free, folks.
You get banned from YouTube for talking about hydroxychloroquine, but you don't get banned for suggestive cicadas. So I'm all for it.
So patreon.com/Parrot Room. Kausfiles is Mickey's newsletter. Nonzero's mine. Kausfiles. Oh, no. Kaus Mickey is your Twitter handle. Robert Ryder's mine. Rate and review The Wright Show. What else?
Don't forget the reverse schadenfreude.
And always remember the reverse schadenfreude. I don't know.
Commonly known as envy. Yeah.
Kind of.
I guess they have a shorter word.
Actually, envy is a more economical way of saying that, isn't it?
If they can put masturbation in the headline, they can put schadenfreude in the headline.
Well, as you know, I support the increasing use of onanism as an economical substitute. So we will see you in the Parrot Room shortly. Is that not the case?
Yes.
Oh, and finally, we should say the thing you're holding up now, that we should say for the benefit of our podcast listeners, you were holding up something when you said this is an anal probe, but now I'd like to know, unless you want to say the answer for the Parrot Room, what is that actually?
Well, you don't know.
It's a carrot slice. Is that a carrot slicer?
I don't know. It's
oh my God, it's got a blade that opens up.
We have an even more probing probe.
Oh, Jesus, that looks like a file. Is that a file?
I don't know, but this is what the aliens reserve for when you're recalcitrant.
Oh, Mickey, that was really disgusting.
Anyway,
that's disgusting.
I went with the mild probe.
Yeah, until just now. Yeah,
I believe is a carrot slicer. Yes,
I think it is a carrot slicer. Okay. So the conversation will get only more elevated, I assure you.
We're climbing the pyramid of gravitas.
Yes. See you there.
See ya.